a procrastinator like me and need a Christmas gift in a hurry? Well, today we're looking at 6 different quilt patterns that you can make in a day. Hi, it's Hannah with Fabric Café. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a procrastinator quilter. I still have not finished all of my Christmas gifts for this year. Basically, the last few weeks of December, Blake doesn't see me at all because I'm just in my sewing room every night, finishing all my gifts. So, if you are like me, then this video is for you. I'm gonna show you 6 different patterns that are so fast and easy, you could get the quilt top done in a day. First off, we're gonna look at our windmill pattern, and this comes from our book, 3-Yard Quilts for Kids. This one goes together super fast because you're only making 1 block, which you then rotate different directions so that you make this fun design right here, and you get all this movement across the quilt. Plus, because you're sewing long sides together and there's no corners when you're sewing your blocks into your rows, you don't have to do any pinning, which really cuts back on time. You will have to do a little pinning when you sew your rows together, but right here, it's really forgiving. You have a corner to match here, but if it's a little bit off, it's okay. So that's gonna make things go really fast. So let's put this on the table and I'll show you some pieces and parts on exactly how to make this pattern. We are going to make a strip assembly where you cut long with the fabric strips and then you sew them on the long edges to make a long strip assembly. Then we're going to cut off a unit. And in this case, the unit is our whole block. Sometimes the units get cut off and sewn onto other things, but in this case, it's just the block. So you're already super far into the quilt when you get to this point. When you assemble them on the quilt, you're just gonna start turning them every which way. And I still have my seam allowances on, so they are a little bit bigger than the quilt. So we have one going this direction, and then one going this way. And remember, long sides, so you don't have to pin anything. And then you just keep on going down. So you're going to sew your blocks, rotating them in long rows first, get all that done, and then you will attach the second row. And this row, it's going a different direction. So on the end, we have it going this way. So our number 3 fabric meets up here. So it's gonna join together to make our nice pinwheel kind of movement there. And then we have our other block going this way. So you're basically just alternating how you turn them so that they come together to make this block right here. It goes together super, super fast. And it's so fun, it's got so much movement, and you get to see all of these bright colors. So let's check out the fabric. So for our number 1 fabric, we have this beautiful floral with lots of movement in it too, with little twirls, lots of bright colors. And this is actually from Fran's last fabric line she put out, Color Burst. So it's all these bright, fun colors. This is gonna go everywhere you see this floral here. So it'll have a nice punch, nice big block for you to see it, as well as on one of our borders. Our number 2 is this textural bright green fabric, and you can see it picks up the green and the floral perfectly. This is gonna go everywhere you see this cream right here on our border and in our blocks. And then for our number 3, we have this gorgeous teal. I love teal, can you tell? It's probably my favorite color. And it picks up all of the teal that is in our flowers, and it's gonna go everywhere you see this blue on the quilt. So it'll have a nice, good framing for it too. And I think this turned out so beautiful. I love all the contrast you have, having that white focus fabric with all the colors on it. It really sets it apart from that bright green and that teal really frames out the quilt and works so nicely with that little twirl. This kit is called Twirling Florals, and it's using the windmill pattern from the 3-Yard Quilts for Kids book. So let's step it up a notch and take a look at our stepping up pattern. This is another one where you do strip piecing and then you cut your units off to make your blocks. This time we're making 2. We have this here and we have this here, but it's only 2 strips that you're sewing together this time. So that kind of evens that out on the time level. And you're gonna turn your blocks different ways so that you get this fun diagonal movement down your quilt. And again, we don't have to pin the blocks together when we sew our rows. We have 2 nice borders framing our quilt. No corner blocks, which are not hard, but take a little bit more time. So this is gonna whip together super fast. Like I mentioned at the quilt, we have 2 strip assemblies for this quilt. So first off, we have one using our fabric number 1 and our fabric number 3. 2 strips sewn together. We have a nice large one of our fabric number 1, so you get to see a lot of it. Then we cut our unit off, ba-bum, and again, it's one of our blocks, so that's already done. We make a second strip assembly, also 2 strips of fabric, but this time with our fabric number 3 and our fabric number 2. And I like that both of the blocks in this pattern are a large size, so you can use 2 big prints, kind of like a double focus, and just frame it out with this number 3 fabric. Again, we are going to just cut off a unit, bam, and there's our second block for the quilt. When you arrange them on the quilt, you're just gonna turn them different ways so that you get your nice angular movement. And these blocks always go this direction, so you can use a directional fabric. Your secondary block will get rotated, so I recommend not using a directional fabric because it'll kind of get wonky. It'll go all which way. You could use a stripe though, and that would be okay because it's only 2 directional. Then you put your other block just sideways like this. And then you just keep doing that along the quilt. You see here, we have a nice block here, which makes that nice diagonal here. And you just keep going like that the whole quilt. So once you make 1 block, make 2 blocks, you're gonna have that quilt done in no time. So you'll be able to get this gift thrown together so fast. So let's take a look at the fabric we have for this. For our number 1, we have this beautiful floral, and I really like it because it's both traditional, but in kind of a more modern color way, so it kind of blends the 2 styles together, because we have this more traditional floral, but with these teal leaves, which I think, again, obviously is super fun. And this is gonna be in our number 1 spot, which is this right here. Our number 2 fabric is a purple floral on a vine on this really soft pink background. And that picks up all of the colors you have in our floral right here because we have a lot of highlights in our floral. So it picks up on the background, and then the flower itself is that slightly darker purple. And it's so pretty, complements it so well. And that's gonna go everywhere you see this little speckle right here. So it's a nice big print that you can still have a lot going on with your quilts. And our number 3 ties it all together. It's a nice dark teal to complement our lighter right here. And it's got a small version of our focus fabric, or focus floral. And I think that's so cute. It just picks it up. And that's gonna go everywhere you see this blue right here. So let's check out an image. And you can see that number 3 has so much contrast with both our number 1 fabric and our number 2. So you can really see that diagonal zigzag that goes down the quilt. It has so much movement, so much pop, and so many different types of fabrics will look beautiful in this. And I do want to let you know that all of the patterns and books you see today are available both as physical copies and as downloadable. So if you're really needing a fast option right now, downloadable is a great way to go. All right, the kit information for this one is Floral Traditions, and it uses the Stepping Up pattern. This is one of my favorite patterns. This is Town Square from the book Easy Peasy. And I love this kind of 3-dimensional look you have because you have your nice blocks here, and the way that your fabrics 2 and 3 are framing it, it kind of looks like it's coming off the quilt at you, which I think is a really cool effect. You make 2 strip assemblies and you put it on either side of this nice big block, which can take a directional fabric, which is awesome. And you don't have to do any pinning when you're assembling the block. I know I keep talking about that, but not having to do a ton of pinning really cuts down on the time it takes to make a quilt. So I'm always looking for that when I need something fast. And if you chain piece these onto the side, it goes really quickly too, which we'll talk a little bit more about that at the table. And plus, once you finish these nice big blocks, they're a really good size, so there's less to put together as you're going down the quilt. So that speeds it up too, and speeds up putting those rows together. So you're gonna get a quilt top done in no time. Now, first off, there's very minimal cutting in this pattern to start with. But another trick to speed it up even more, you're gonna cut nice big squares for the center of your block. Now I have a little bit of my strip left over because I've cut a bunch off already, but you're gonna have nice long with the fabric strips. If you keep it folded together, like it is when you cut your strip, you can cut 2 squares at a time. And I know many of you out there are gonna be like, Hannah, we know this, but you know, for any new quilters out there, this is a really great trick. I didn't know this when I first started, and it is a huge time saver. And then I take a square ruler. I love square rulers. It's probably my favorite tool in my sewing room because I'm able to square up everything when I make my first cut. Line it up with the size we need. I like to line it up on the edge, and I just line it up on the bottom. It's already nice and squared for me. And then I'm going to whoop. And then I have 2 blocks. Ta-da! So that's gonna make your cutting go really, really quickly. Your other pieces, you're going to make 2 strip sets. And the first one is like this. So you can see we've sewn 2 strips of fabric sewn together to make a long strip assembly, just sewn on the long edges. And then we're gonna cut off our units. This is gonna become the top and bottom of our block. I highly recommend chain piecing when you make these because that's gonna make it go really quickly too, cut down on your sewing time. In case you don't know what chain piecing is, I'll give you a little look. So what I would recommend for you is to make a stack of your units, figure out what way they need to go. So my blocks would go like this, ta-da! And then I would lay them beside my machine the way I need to put them into the machine to sew them. And what you're gonna do is you're just going to pick up one piece. It's nice to have the big piece on the bottom. It helps keep things from puckering, but I have been known to break that rule. If I'm sewing a really long strip onto pieces, I usually put the long strip on the bottom, and you're just going to line up your piece. Then you would sew this, don't take it out of the machine, and just line up your second, and then you keep on going. So there's just a little bit of thread between. You end up with blocks sewn together. Now I would have more. This is just a little example, but you can see there's just a little bit of thread in between. I would go in, snip those, and then be able to sew my block onto the other side. But this is how you chain piece. If you've never tried it, I recommend giving it a try because maybe you'll be like me and you'll end up a chain piecer believer. So we have our block, and then we have our unit, our first unit. We're gonna sew that on the top, and then we're gonna sew one on the bottom, alternating the fabrics. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're gonna chain piece. Just make sure that your units are facing the correct direction so that we don't have to do any seam ripping. And for our other units, we sew another strip assembly. You know, we're getting really used to these. We're getting really fast at that. But these are just much longer, much bigger strips of fabric. We cut off our units, and then after these are sewn on, we're gonna sew this onto the side. I'm gonna stack that a little bit because we still have seam allowances on, so it doesn't line up exactly when they're not sewn, but they will when you sew them together. Then we have one on the other side. So you get this really nice kind of 3-dimensional block like I mentioned. Once you sew all of your blocks together, you're gonna sew them into your rows and it's gonna go together super, super fast. You'll definitely get this one done in a day. Plus, it's a really fun pattern to make. I've made this one and I loved it. I am so excited to show you the fabric for this quilt because it is so cute. It is very much up my alley. I love it so much. We have all of these forest animals hiding in the leaves, and it's such a beautiful art style. It almost reminds me of like a Thomas Kincaid or something, but we have these little raccoons. Oh, there's a chipmunk there. I hadn't seen the chipmunk till now. And then we've got some foxes sleeping. They are so sweet, so cute. They are gonna go everywhere you see the floral here, so it'll be a nice big block. And then our number 2 fabric is this mottled creamy tan, which picks up some of the colors in the underbrush as well as the animals themselves. And that will go everywhere you see your green. For our number 3, we have this nice black crackle texture. So it has a lot of movement and keeps it from being flat. And that picks up a lot of the dark colors you see in it, but also has a nice contrast. That's gonna go everywhere you see our blue here and on the binding. It is so cute. I love it. And it's so soothing. It's got those dark colors, but that cream in the background really lightens the whole quilt up. So we have a lot of contrast with that number 2 and that number 3. So you can see all of your sweet little animals hiding and sleeping and exploring the woods. This kit is called Forest Families, and it's using the town square pattern from the Easy Peasy book. This is our Checkmate pattern from the book 3-Yard Quilts for Kids. And fun fact about this quilt, I have actually made this in a day. It goes together really quickly because you see here, we just have a nice long strip of fabric. So that means you're gonna have very minimal cutting, which also saves a lot of time. Our secondary row is just a 4-patch strip, and you will have to pin where all of these junctions meet, but after you finish that second row, these don't have to be pinned because it's just a nice straight line going down your quilt. So kind of opposite of what we've been looking at. You don't have to pin the rows together, but you pin the blocks. So it kind of evens out. We do have corner blocks on the quilt, but those go together really quickly, and we've only got 2 borders, so that will speed up the process. And what you do is you're just gonna cut long with the fabric strips, and then we're just gonna trim our selvages off. So you see we have our nice long strip, and then the pattern will tell you exactly how much to trim off the edge, just so that it's even with your quilt. For our secondary row, we have a nice 4-patch row. So we're gonna start off with our trusty strip assembly. And you can see we've cut some units off already. You're gonna sew your nice 2 strips together on the long edges. We're gonna cut off our units, and then we're gonna use those to make our 4-patch. So 4 patches are where you're gonna need to pin in this quilt. You're gonna take your pieces, one of them gets rotated. So I don't recommend using a directional fabric because it is gonna get twisted and turned. And then all I do is I lay it flat. I make sure that those are butting up. Gonna flip it over. And then I like to do my seams open. It's just a personal preference. It helps me not have to repress. If I have pressed something the wrong direction and they don't nest correctly, I can get it nesting every time. And I'm just going to make sure that these are nice and even with the seams touching. And then I'm gonna push 1 pin out the back and then back through the front. And I'm probably not as exact with my pinning as many people are, but it's about the process, right? It's fun for you and for whoever you're gifting it to. You have 5 different 4 patches to make up your row. So what I would suggest is go ahead and pin 5 of your 4 patches together for your row, sew all of those, press them, and then sew those 5 4 patches together. So that way it kind of makes it like your batch sewing, you know, you do it in one little chunk. And that kind of speeds up the process too. Then you're gonna sew your nice long 4-patch strip to your nice long row. And then you've got your quilt. So I made this one in a day. It went together really quickly and I enjoyed doing it. Very minimal cutting, minimal amount of pinning. So you're gonna be able to knock it out super fast. We have some very majestic fabric for this Checkmate. We have these gorgeous horses with all of these multicolored florals, and their hair is all multicolored, and they're on this beautiful sunset texture background. So gorgeous. And that's gonna look really nice in our big long strip here. This pattern can really accommodate a large pattern with a lot of color, a lot of movement, because it has a nice long strip for it. Our number 2, we went with this nice cream with a little speckle texture on it. And that's gonna pick up a lot of the colors in the horses and also just warm it up. So that's gonna be everywhere you see this tan right here. And our number 3, again, we've got some teal, but we have these horseshoes on it. And these horseshoes have all these different florals on it. And you can see it picks up some of the florals that are in our horses. And that's gonna go everywhere you see our black. And it's a nice size for that block too. You can see how well those horseshoes work in that 4-patch. They're the perfect size to have a lot of it shown, but also have these nice peaks of color, and they're not so big that they're going to distract from your beautiful horses. which just look gorgeous galloping across the surface of your quilt. We have those nice little cream corner blocks on the edges that really frame out the quilt. And I think this one turned out so stunning. Now, if you enjoy making 4 patches, I do want to mention the quilt that's behind me. This is our So Quick pattern, and it also goes together really fast. You have a nice big block, and then you have it alternated with a 4 patch. And it's a pretty big 4 patch too, so it goes together really quickly. This was actually the first quilt I ever made. I did it in little kitty fabrics and it turned out so cute, and it was really simple to make. We actually have a video series showing me making that quilt, so if you're interested, check it out. The kit information for these beautiful horses is Wild Beauty, and it's using the Checkmate pattern from Quilts for Kids. This pattern I think is one of our unsung heroes at Fabric Cafe because it goes together super fast. This is Overnight Sensation from the Easy Does It book. And again, we're working with the 4 patch, so we will have to pin here at our corners, but they're a really big 4 patch, and we only have to pin 6 times total for this quilt. You heard me, 6 times, because we have 6 4 patch blocks. Plus, this is made using 2 different strip assemblies. We have one for this unit and one for this unit, which means you can use directional fabric in this pattern, which is really exciting. It's made in these nice vertical rows, and it's sashed right here, which means we don't have to pin because it's taken care of by this sashing strip. We got 3 cute borders on it, and it turns out so cute in every fabric you have. So like I said at the quilt, we're gonna make 2 different strip assemblies. We're gonna make one with our fabric 1 on the top and our fabric 3 on the bottom. And you can see we've already cut some units off of this, so it's not the full with the fabric. And then for our second strip assembly, we're gonna reverse those. So we're gonna put our, move this over just a little bit, we're gonna put our fabric number 3 on the top and our fabric number 1 on the bottom. Now these fabrics are all tossed, so it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but remember in the last quilt, our Checkmate, you had to rotate one of your units to make your 4 patch, so you wouldn't be able to use directional fabric. But because we have 2 different strip assemblies sewn with 1 on top here and then 1 on the bottom over here, it means that you can use a directional fabric and it's gonna go the right way every single time. You don't have to rotate those blocks to make your 4 patch, which is awesome. Fabric number 1, fabric number 3, and then we have our fabric number 3, fabric number 1. No rotation necessary. Now I told you at the quilt that it's a vertical assembly. So for your next step after you've made your 4 patches, you're gonna take a nice long width of fabric strip and you're gonna sew it to the bottom of that block. And then you're gonna trim it even, press it, and that's your block. And that's why you don't have to match any seams right there because it's separated by this sashing. So this is your first block with your nice sashing, your 4 patch, and you're just gonna alternate going down your quilt in columns. So you're gonna have a block like this with another sash, then you're gonna have another 4 patch with another sash, and then you just have a 4 patch at the bottom with no sash on it because the border is what's going to make up that final sashing. Once you have your vertical column all sewn together, then you're gonna add your sashing strip in between your rows. So you're gonna start by taking a long width of fabric strip. You're gonna sew these end to end just like you would do for a border. Then you're going to sew it along the side of one of your sewn vertical rows. And then after that's sewn on and pressed, you'll take the other side, your other vertical row, and sew that onto the strip. And this is what makes it so you don't have to have any pinning right here because this strip keeps them separate, so you don't have to worry about how your 4 patches are gonna match up. Plus, another little fun tidbit about this, if you're not using directional fabric like I'm not here, you could cut the time down even more and just make 1 strip assembly, making sure you get as many strip assemblies as you need, just looking at the instructions, and then rotate your blocks. If you're using directional fabric, don't do that. Do it just like the pattern says. But if you're doing tossed, you could save even more time doing that. We've got this beautiful batik kit. We have these gorgeous light blue leaves with lots of different textures, some dark blue thrown in there. and they're floating on top of a kind of mottled dark blue. Beautiful, really soothing and comforting. This is going to go everywhere you see your floral right here, and it will also be on your border. Then our fabric number 2 is our sashing strips. And this is fun. It has this little kind of triangular pattern on there with this light blue, picking up all the light blue shades in our leaves. And that's going to go everywhere you see this pink right here. So it'll add a lot of texture to the quilt, which I think is really fun. Then our number 3. We went with a kind of smaller print on this one, but you could do a larger print too and make it kind of a double focus. We picked up the teals and kind of the darker tones in our leaves, and that's going to go everywhere you see this gray right here. It has a little bit of a nice texture to it too. So you can see on the screen that image of it. It is so striking with that light blue framing it. It has a nice contrast. That number 3 really contrasts with the dark background of the leaves for our number 1, and that light blue really works in our number 2, framing out those 4 patches. It just looks stunning, and it will go up so fast. The kit info for this is Indigo Breeze, and it's using the Overnight Sensation pattern from our book, Easy Does It. This is another quilt that is made in vertical rows or columns. This is our Byzantine Door pattern from the Quick and Easy book. And we have a nice big block right here for our focus, which is made using strip piecing. So we have a sash on the bottom, the bottom and the top, and then it's alternated with just a large rectangle. So you can use really big prints in both your number 1 and your number 2, and both of them can be directional, which is really cool. And I think my favorite thing about this pattern is there are no seams to match anywhere. So you don't have to do any pinning, which is going to cut back on the time significantly. It goes together super fast with these nice long strips on the sides, and it makes up in no time to be a gorgeous show-stopping quilt. First off, you're going to start with a nice big block. This is just made from a strip assembly. You're going to have nice big strip of your focus fabric here, so you have a lot to work with. And then you have your number 3 framing it. This is going to go right here. You're going to make vertical rows, and you're going to alternate it with just a rectangle, which is super easy. And you can follow the same method we did for Town Square, where you can cut off 2 at a time. So that makes it go really fast. And then you're going to alternate it with this, so you get your nice sashing on the top. Then we're going to put another one of these down at the bottom. It'll be a little crinkly, but you can see I don't have very long arms. So you can see how this is going to frame it nicely with that number 3 fabric on both sides of your number 2. So you're just going to keep on going down your quilt making vertical rows, except when you get to the very bottom, you're going to, like we did in our Overnight Sensation, you're going to take a strip of fabric along with the fabric strip, and you're going to sew it to the very bottom of your fabric number 2, your last square, so that you get your final look. After your vertical rows are done and sewn together, we're going to put sashing on either side of them. So we're going to sew long strips together, just like we did before, and you're going to sew it along the edge with our fabric number 3 to give that final line. And you're going to have one on either side, so it has that nice framework for your blocks. Then we're going to do that one more time with our number 2 fabric, and then that's going to go in between our vertical rows so that we have this nice separation. So you'll have this on this side with your nice vertical row, with this just separating it, giving it a little pop of color. It's really fast, really easy to go together, and it works so well with a nice big print. And remember, both prints can be directional. One of my favorite things about the Byzantine Door pattern is how versatile it can be with your fabrics. So here you see we have a nice traditional floral, very pretty, very elegant. But then the fabric I'm going to show you is bright, bold, fun, whimsical, and it works for both of them, which I love. So no matter what you got, it can work in this pattern. So for our number 1 fabric, we have these really big bursts of different shapes and colors. It kind of looks like beads, or also looks to me like a kaleidoscope. You know, when you're looking through a kaleidoscope and all the shape starts moving around to make the different images. That's what it looks like to me, just like blown up. So that's gonna be our number 1 fabric, which is gonna go everywhere you see this floral here, as well as on the border. And then our number 2 fabric has a nice print on it, which is gonna pop really well in our secondary block, but it's little rainbow burst, picking up the movement and the shapes of our kaleidoscope images here. And that's gonna go everywhere you see this blue. So it's also gonna be the separation between our dark blue on our sashing. And our number 3 is this blue, this royal blue with a lot of movement, a lot of circles and some polka dots. And that's gonna go everywhere you see the dark blue floral here. I love the movement on this one. It's so bright, so cheerful, and I love the royal blue setting all of that apart. I think the number 2 really helps it as well, making those different columns. It really gives them their own chance to shine. I think it turned out so cheerful. I love it so much. And this kit is called Dizzy Dazzle, using the Byzantine Door pattern from the book Quick and Easy. There are lots of other super fast 3-yard quilt patterns, but these are my go-tos. What are your go-to fast 3-yard quilt patterns? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked that idea of no seam matching for your quilts, then be sure to watch the video that pops up next. Happy quilting!